Look around your immediate environment right now. I mean, literally just sweep your eyes across the room or the desk or, the train car, wherever you happen to be right now.
Yeah, just take a quick scan of what's around you.
Exactly. I want you to look for a ghost.
A ghost.
Well, specifically, an object sitting somewhere near you that has completely outlived its original purpose.
Oh, right. Like a landline phone jack in the wall that hasn't been used in a decade.
Right. Or maybe it's a CD rack that's currently just holding up, like, tangled router cables.
Uh-huh.
Or a decorative paperweight holding down absolutely nothing.
Yeah, we walk past these, I guess you could call them architectural graveyards of obsolete habits every single day.
Every single day. And we're just completely blind to them. They just become background noise.
They really do.
So our mission for today's deep dive is to shine a spotlight on that noise. We're unpacking this short, but honestly profoundly philosophical blog post.
It really is a fascinating read.
Yeah, it's titled Notes on Photography Part 248, The Nostalgic Memory of Newspaper Rack. It was published on July 19th, 2026 by an author known just as Ang.
And what's great is that this piece isn't merely about a metal rack that holds paper.
Not at all.
It's this deep exploration of what these forgotten objects around us actually reveal about our changing human attention spans and our memories, and even just how we interact with reality.
Totally. But to understand the gravity of these everyday objects, we kind of have to start by looking at the modern tool we use to capture them, which is, of course, the smartphone camera.
Right. And Ang opens the piece by framing photography not as some specialized art form, but as this essential daily habit.
Because it's just so accessible now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Basically, anyone with a decent mobile camera can participate.
Hmm.
And the author really emphasizes the immense value of carrying this camera as an, quote, everyday carry item.
Right, like your keys or your wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And specifically because it allows us to document items that, in Ang's words, quietly tell a story.
Quietly tell a story. I love that phrasing.
Me too.
All right.
Because, think about it. For over a century, the camera was an instrument reserved almost exclusively for loud stories.
Right. Weddings, graduations, historical events, things like that.
Exactly. It required heavy equipment, expensive film, and a very deliberate, premeditated intention to document a major life milestone. You didn't just casually bring a camera to the grocery store in 1950.
No, definitely not. But the smartphone camera completely upended that whole dynamic.
It really did.
Yeah.
By embedding this high-resolution lens into a device we already carry just for communication, the barrier to entry basically dropped to zero.
Yeah, it democratized our ability to act as documentarians of the mundane. It shifted the whole photographic lens from the extraordinary to the entirely ordinary.
Right.
It functions a bit like a butterfly net, I think.
Oh, how so?
Well, instead of catching actual butterflies, you walk through your daily life equipped to catch these tiny, quiet narratives that would otherwise just flutter away completely unnoticed on, like, a random Tuesday afternoon.
That's a really great analogy.
But let me push back on that for a second. Does having this incredibly high-tech camera in our pockets actually make us more observant of these quiet, mundane objects?
You mean as opposed to what?
As opposed to just making us more desperate to capture absolutely everything without really looking at any of it? Like,
Yeah.
Are we truly observing our environments, or are we just hoarding digital files?
That is the big question, isn't it? And I think the line between active observation and mindless hoarding is defined entirely by intention.
Intention. Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the human brain actively filters out the vast majority of visual information we encounter daily, literally just to prevent cognitive overload.
Sure, otherwise we'd go crazy trying to process every single leaf on a tree.
Exactly. We rely on this network in the brain called the reticular activating system.
Wait, the reticular what?
The reticular activating system, it's basically the bouncer for your brain. It decides what gets your conscious attention and what gets ignored.
Okay, got it.
So when you adopt the mindset of someone carrying a camera specifically to capture quiet stories, you actively reprogram that filtering system.
Oh, wow. So you're literally changing how your brain sees the street.
Yes, exactly. You aren't just looking ahead to your destination anymore. You are actively scanning the periphery. The camera in your pocket becomes this ongoing invitation to just pause.
Because just knowing you have the tool to capture a moment actually changes your relationship with the environment.
Right. You're training your brain to look for narrative in places you would normally completely ignore.
But then where does the mindless hoarding come in?
Mindless hoarding happens when the camera is used as a substitute for memory, like snapping a picture of a painting in a museum so you don't have to actually put in the effort to look at it.
Oh, yeah. Guilty as charged. I definitely have a phone full of museum placards I've never read.
Right, we all do it. But Ang is describing the exact opposite phenomenon. The device is being used to force a moment of extended observation on something entirely unremarkable.
Okay, so the democratization of the camera shifted the purpose of daily photography from preserving major events to actively interrogating the present moment.
Beautifully put, yes.
It forces you to look at a regular street corner and search for the narrative. And I think that cognitive shift sets the stage for what Aang actually captured.
Yeah, let's talk about the photo itself.
Because it wasn't a spectacular sunset or some amazing feat of architecture, Aang literally took a picture of a completely overlooked, everyday newspaper rack.
This is standard metal wire rack.
Yeah. But this mundane object unlocks a highly specific, deeply sensory memory for the author. Aang describes being a youth, spending these blazing hot summer days inside a local library.
It's such a vivid scene.
It really is. The post paints this picture of escaping the oppressive heat by just soaking in the intense artificial chill of the library's air conditioning.
And sitting down to read the daily news.
Right. And there is one detail Aang mentions that just cuts through the text completely for me.
Which one?
The physical sound and the tactile experience of flipping the, quote, broad pages of a newspaper.
Oh, yeah. Aang is constructing a complete physical and environmental ecosystem for us right there.
Yeah, it's so immersive.
Think about it. The blazing heat outside contrasts with the very specific thermal experience of the air conditioning inside.
The blast of that cold air when you walk through the doors.
Exactly. Then you have the physical scale of the broad pages themselves, which actually demand a certain posture, right? Like you need physical space to manage an open newspaper.
You can't just read it on a crowded subway easily.
No, you've got your elbows out, you're leaning over it. And finally, you have the auditory signature of the paper rustling. Aang is using these sensory details as emotional anchors.
So the newspaper rack isn't just a piece of wire and metal anymore.
Not at all. It's the physical trigger for this robust network of memories that encompass temperature, sound, and touch.
It functions as a sensory time machine, basically. Aang sees this metal wire rack, and suddenly the AC is blasting and the paper is crinkling.
A sensory time machine is a perfect way to put it.
But let me ask you this. Why do physical, analog objects anchor our memories so much better than digital ones?
That's a great question.
Because you read Aang's post and you feel the atmosphere of that library immediately. Yet, you never hear someone wax poetic about the nostalgic sound of scrolling a mouse wheel.
Right, or the romantic glow of a PDF loading on a tablet.
Exactly. Why is that?
Well, it all comes down to how the human brain, and specifically the hippocampus, encodes experience and maps information.
Okay, the hippocampus.
Yeah, the hippocampus is deeply, deeply involved in spatial memory. It evolved to help us navigate three-dimensional physical environments.
Like remembering where a food source is or where a predator lives.
Exactly. So when Aang was reading that newspaper, it wasn't merely a visual intake of text. It was a full bodily experience.
Because broad newspaper pages are unwieldy.
Very unwieldy. They require two hands, they take up physical space, and you have to physically turn them, folding and unfolding the paper, just to find the continuation of an article.
Right, jumping from page 1 to page 17.
Yes, and your brain maps the information you're reading to its physical location on the page.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. You remember subconsciously that a specific story was on the bottom right corner of the left-hand page, just below a crease.
That is so true. I can picture textbooks from college just like that.
Right. Plus, you feel the tactile texture of the cheap paper, you smell the ink, and you hear the sharp crinkle of the pages turning.
So there are just way more inputs.
Tons more. Your brain weaves all of these varied sensory inputs, tactile, auditory, olfactory, thermal, spatial, and into this incredibly complex, multidimensional neural network. The memory just has numerous access points.
Whereas digital media kind of strips away all of that spatial and sensory topography.
Completely. A digital screen really homogenizes the human experience.
Homogenizes it, like makes it all the same.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it. Whether you are reading a heartbreaking news report, watching a comedic video, reviewing a recipe, or texting a family member, the physical interaction is completely identical.
You're just tapping glass.
Right. Your fingertips touch a smooth, temperature-neutral piece of glass. There's no spatial mapping because the text just scrolls endlessly upward from nowhere and vanishes into nowhere.
I got no geography.
None. And the physical weight of a digital device never changes. Whereas with a physical book or a really thick Sunday newspaper, you can subconsciously feel the weight shifting from your right hand to your left as you progress.
Giving you a physical sense of your journey through the information. I never thought about that, but you literally feel how much you have left to read in your hands.
Exactly, because the physical interaction with the screen is entirely uniform, the memories formed like those unique sensory and spatial anchors. Aang's memory of the newspaper is so potent because the physical act of reading it engaged the entire body in a way that is totally unique to that specific medium.
So the medium wasn't just a neutral delivery vehicle for the news. The physical interaction with the medium was the event itself.
Yes, exactly.
And that immersive, almost theatrical act of navigating giant, broad pages provides a really sharp contrast to how Aang views modern media consumption.
His huge shift.
Because the nostalgia for the library leans directly into this stark critique of the present. Aang points out that hardly anyone reads newspapers anymore, save for a few retired individuals who still engage in what Aang describes as the traditional way of consuming and reflecting on the news at a slow pace.
Right. The slow pace is key there.
Yeah. And for the rest of society, Aang paints a fairly bleak picture. We are depicted as basically infinitely scrolling through videos, desperately searching for the next item that can hold our attention for barely 3 seconds.
Barely 3 seconds.
Yeah, and Aang labels this specific loss of patience as tragic.
And the use of the word tragic there is really important. It indicates that Aang views this shift not just as a casual change in habit, but as a fundamental loss of cognitive capacity.
That's a strong claim.
It is, but we need to look at the specific binary Aang sets up here. On one side, you have the retired folks reading the newspaper, engaged in a slow pace linked directly to the act of reflecting.
Right.
On the other side, the infinite scroll is characterized as a desperate search merely to catch our attention. The contrast is between sustained cognitive engagement and just transient stimulation.
But let me play devil's advocate for a minute. Is Aang just falling into the classic trap of romanticizing the past?
You mean the whole things were better back in my day trope?
Yeah, exactly. Because every generation seems convinced that the newest technology is going to destroy the human mind. I mean, Socrates famously argued that writing things down would ruin our memory because we wouldn't need to internalize information anymore.
He did say that, yes.
So is there an objective, measurable tragedy in losing our ability to focus for more than 3 seconds? Or is this just the kids these days with their screens trope repackaged for 2026?
It's a fair question. But dismissing these observations as mere generational nostalgia really ignores the neurobiological realities of the infinite scroll.
Okay, so there's actual science backing up the tragedy.
Absolutely. And honestly, Socrates was actually right that writing changed how our memory worked, even if the trade-off, gave us civilization.
Fair point. Pretty good trade-off.
But what Aang is pointing to is a fundamental alteration in our brain's reward circuitry. The infinite scroll operates on a variable reward schedule.
Like a slot machine?
Much like a slot machine. When you scroll to a new video, your brain gets a microspike of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter associated with seeking and anticipating reward.
Right, it feels good.
It does. But because the content is only engaging for about 3 seconds, that dopamine spike drops incredibly rapidly, which prompts you to scroll again to get the next hit.
So you're just constantly pulling the lever.
Over and over. This cycle essentially hijacks the brain's orienting response, which is our primal instinct to pay attention to new stimuli in our environment. You become locked in a loop of constant seeking without ever actually finding satisfaction.
Which I imagine completely bypasses the part of the brain responsible for deep thought.
Completely. Because the traditional medium of the newspaper inherently required friction.
Friction, like physical effort.
Yeah. When you finish an article on a broad page, you have to physically turn the page, fold the paper back on itself, and visually scan the new layout to find the next headline.
Right, you have to do actual work to get to the next story.
Those physical actions take a few seconds. And in cognitive psychology, those few seconds are known as cognitive breathing room.
Cognitive breathing room, I like that.
It is the necessary gap where your prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for complex reasoning and analysis, takes the information you just acquired and begins integrating it with your existing knowledge.
So that friction is where the reflection actually occurs.
Exactly. In the architecture of the infinite video scroll, friction has been completely engineered out of existence.
They intentionally removed all the friction.
Yes. The moment one 3-second video ends, the algorithm immediately begins playing the next one. There is zero pause, which means there is zero space for consolidation.
Wow.
So Eng's use of the word tragic absolutely applies to the loss of this cognitive space. We have traded the environment required for reflection for an environment optimized for unyielding, frictionless stimulation.
It's crazy because we've optimized away the exact moments where actual thinking happens.
We have.
We started treating friction as a design flaw when it was actually the mechanism that allowed us to process the world in the first place.
That's a great way to put it.
And armed with that context, Aang brings us back to the photograph of the newspaper rack itself, but completely reframes the object.
Right, the rack takes on a new meaning.
Yeah, since we've established the tragic nature of losing that slow reflection, Aang concludes the post by viewing this long-forgotten newspaper rack not as obsolete street furniture, but as a symbol.
A monument.
Yes. Aang writes that it stands as a beautiful reminder of a slower, more relaxed era of consumption.
It ceases to be a functional object and becomes a historical monument. It's a physical marker of a psychological state that we have largely abandoned.
Yeah.
People just walk past this metal cage on modern city streets, staring into their glass screens, locked into these 3-second dopamine loops, completely ignoring the artifact that used to dictate the intellectual pacing of the entire neighborhood.
That visual is so powerful, but treating it as a monument brings up a really profound irony in Aang's piece, I think.
Oh, the irony is thick.
Because Aang used a smartphone, a device intrinsically linked to the infinite scroll and the algorithmic feeds and the erosion of our attention spans, to memorialize a monument to slow-paced analog reflection.
Right. It's like using a Formula One race car to carefully pace a horse-drawn carriage.
That is exactly what it is. The technology designed to accelerate our consumption to breakneck speeds was ultimately utilized to hit the brakes.
And that irony is honestly the most instructive part of Aang's entire blog post.
How so?
Because it demonstrates that the technology itself is not inherently deterministic. The smartphone is just an amplifier of intention.
Back to intention again.
Yes. When we operate on default settings, the device pulls us into the frictionless river of constant stimulation. But Aang essentially hacks the modern tool.
By stopping the scroll and choosing to use the camera instead.
Exactly. Aang forces a moment of profound, sustained observation. Pointing the ultimate instrument of distraction at an object representing patience proves that we still have agency.
We're not helpless.
No, we aren't. The tool can absolutely be used to cultivate deep, quiet reflection, provided the user supplies the necessary friction.
So, if the newspaper rack is a monument to a slower era, how can you, the listener, build virtual newspaper racks into your own digital life?
That's the practical application right there.
Yeah, because if friction is the key to reflection, how do we manufacture that relaxed consumption today, when the architecture of the digital world is aggressively built to prevent it?
Well, building a virtual newspaper rack requires designing your digital environment to intentionally reintroduce the friction that engineers have spent a decade removing.
Right. We can't just try harder.
No. Relying purely on willpower to stop scrolling after 3 seconds is a losing battle against supercomputers designed to capture your attention. You will lose that fight.
Every time.
You have to change the environment. So this might mean disabling autoplay on every single platform you use.
Oh, forcing yourself to make a conscious physical choice to click a button before the next piece of content begins?
Exactly.
Sure.
Introduce a choice.
Yeah.
Or it could mean setting your phone screen to grayscale.
Grayscale. Really?
Yeah. It removes all the vibrant colors that artificially stimulate the brain's reward centers. It makes the infinite scroll significantly less appealing.
That makes total sense. Taking the candy coating off it.
Precisely. Or you could apply spatial memory to your digital habits.
Like the library memory. How do you do that at home?
By designating a specific physical chair in your home as your reading chair. You create a self-imposed rule. When sitting in this chair, there is no scrolling. You read one long-form article from start to finish, and then you sit in silence for 60 seconds before standing up.
Oh, wow. I love that idea.
You have to manufacture the cognitive space of the broad pages and the cool library air conditioning through deliberate environmental design.
You essentially have to act as the architect of your own attention.
Yes.
Creating these artificial pauses so your brain actually has the time to digest what it is consuming.
Which is exactly what Aang did by stopping to take the photo.
The intellectual journey Aang takes us on here is really remarkable. I mean, we started by examining how the mobile camera, as an everyday carry item, democratized our ability to act as documentarians.
Right, retraining our brains to actively scan for the quiet stories hidden in our routines.
Exactly. And then we stepped into the sensory landscape of the library, unpacking the neurobiology of why the tactile, spatial experience of broad newspaper pages creates these resilient, bodily memories that flat glass screens just cannot replicate.
And that sensory foundation is what made Eng's critique of the present so striking.
Totally. By contrasting the slow pace of analog reflection with the 3-second increments of the infinite scroll, we explored how the removal of friction eliminates the cognitive breathing room required for higher order thinking.
It's sobering. We are losing not just a medium of paper, but the neurological space for processing our reality.
Which ultimately brought us back to the newspaper rack as an ignored monument to patience, captured with, poetic irony by the very device responsible for its
But a
obsolescence.
brilliant full circle.
So consider this your invitation for the day. At some point, interrupt your own frictionless loop. Find an everyday object, maybe that ghost of an object you spotted at the very beginning of this deep dive, and give it more than 3 seconds of your attention.
Just pause and look at it.
Yeah. Reflect on the quiet story it tells about how we used to live and how we live now.
Because the mundane objects around us are constantly telling these stories, just waiting for someone willing to supply the friction needed to actually notice them.
Absolutely. And building on Eng's reflections, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Oh, I'm curious.
If our fast-paced mobile cameras are currently documenting the forgotten relics of the analog era, looking back with nostalgia at newspaper racks and landlines, what is going to happen in the future?
That's a great question.
Picture the year 2056. What completely mundane, digital, fast-paced interface or piece of hardware from our current era of 2026 will someone photograph 30 years from now?
Wow.
What will they look back on with immense nostalgia, wishing they could return to the, quote, good old slow days?
That is a perspective that reframes our entire current reality.
It really does. Take that question with you as you navigate the slow pace of your day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.